A young reporter thought he could humiliate Clint Eastwood, but he never saw this comeback coming. The ballroom at the Beverly Wilshire Hotel was a breathtaking display of elegance, crystal chandeliers casting a warm glow, their reflections dancing off gold-trimmed walls. The air carried a mix of aged whiskey, expensive perfume, and that familiar tension that always came when Hollywood's elite gathered under one roof. Guests in tailored suits and designer gowns moved gracefully from table to table, their voices a controlled murmur of industry gossip, forced laughter, and backhanded compliments. Some had come for the cause. Tonight's gala was in support of veterans' mental health initiatives. But for many, it was just another photo op, another chance to be seen, to network, to reinforce their place in the industry's hierarchy. And then, Clint Eastwood walked in. No entourage. No grand entrance. Just him, dressed in a well-fitted black suit, hands tucked casually in his pockets, exuding that quiet confidence that needed no introduction. At 94, he moved slower than before, but there was still something about him, something in the way his eyes scanned the room that commanded respect. Conversations trailed off mid-sentence. Eyes flicked in his direction. A few whispers passed between guests. He wasn't the kind of celebrity people fawned over. You didn't gush. You acknowledged him. You respected him. He made his way to a small group near the bar, greeting longtime friends with firm handshakes. Leaning in slightly, he listened intently over the soft jazz playing in the background. Small talk wasn't his thing, but when he did listen, he made people feel like their words mattered, a rare trait in this town. Across the ballroom, a young journalist named Brandon Keller was watching. Not a household name, but in the world of political commentary, he was making waves, a so-called fearless, no-nonsense voice of a new generation. His social media following had grown off the back of articles attacking outdated, conservative figures.
And tonight?
He saw an opportunity. Clint Eastwood was a relic, a man from an era that didn't fit the new Hollywood narrative. And Keller? He was ready to make a statement. His expression, part arrogance, part excitement, made one thing clear. He had already decided how this confrontation would go. He wasn't here for a discussion.
He was here for a takedown.
But he had no idea who he was dealing with. Straightening his tie, Keller grabbed his phone, already set to record, and weaved through the crowd. He wasn't nervous. No, he was confident. Too confident. This wasn't just about questioning an old actor's views. It was about creating a moment. Something viral. Something that would make headlines. As he approached, the energy at the bar shifted. A few guests took a step back, sensing an interruption. Clint Eastwood, in the middle of listening to a war veteran's story, barely acknowledged the young man's presence. That only made Keller more determined. Clearing his throat, he spoke, voice just loud enough to draw attention. "Mr. Eastwood," he said, flashing a tight-lipped smile. "Brandon Keller, the Sentinel Review. Mind if I ask you a few questions?" Eastwood glanced at him, brief, unreadable, then turned back to his conversation. Keller didn't like that. Taking a small step closer, he forced a chuckle. "I'll make it quick," he added. "I just wanted to get your thoughts on, well, Hollywood's changing landscape. You've been in the industry for over 60 years. Do you think people like you still have a place in it?" The jab was intentional. The phrase "people like you" hung in the air, heavy with implication. A few guests turned their heads toward the exchange. Someone set their drink down a little too loudly. Even the bartender, mid-pour, paused for just a second. Clint Eastwood finally looked at him. His gaze was steady, like a man deciding whether or not something was worth his time.
Keller pressed on.
"Because, he continued, Hollywood is evolving. The old ways of thinking, outdated masculinity," he gestured vaguely. "Conservative values. A lot of people believe it's time to move forward. That guys like you are out of touch with what modern audiences want." There it was. The setup. The moment Keller had been waiting for. He was on camera, in front of an audience, standing toe-to-toe with a Hollywood legend. This was it. He could already see the headline. Clint Eastwood finally called out. Watch him stumble over his own ignorance. But that headline? It was about to collapse. Because Clint Eastwood wasn't the one stumbling. For a long second, he just looked at Keller. Not angry, not offended, just a stare. The kind that made a man question if he'd made the right choice. A silence stretched between them, pulling in the attention of everyone within earshot. Then, Eastwood sighed. Not the sigh of exhaustion, but one of complete disinterest. He took a sip of his drink, set it back down, and finally spoke. "You rehearsed that one, didn't you?" A chuckle rippled through the crowd, low, but unmistakable. Keller's jaw tightened, but he held his composure. "I'm just asking the questions people want answers to," he shot back. Eastwood tilted his head slightly. "People," he repeated, as if tasting the word. "Or just you?" That wasn't part of the script. The veteran actor leaned forward, resting an elbow on the bar. "You think the world just moves forward because some guy with a keyboard says so?" His voice was steady, measured, the same tone he'd used in 100 films to deliver a line that sent chills through the screen. "That real change happens because somebody like you points a finger and says, 'That's old. Throw it out?'" Keller opened his mouth, but Eastwood wasn't finished. "Let me tell you something, kid." He let the words hang, letting the weight settle in. "You don't erase the past just because you don't like it. You learn from it. You build on it. You take what worked, fix what didn't, and move forward. That's progress. Not whatever the hell this is." He mimicked Keller's earlier dismissive hand gesture. This time, the laughter was louder. Someone even clapped. Keller's face burned, but he wasn't ready to back down. "With all due respect, Mr. Eastwood," he said, voice a little tighter, "it's easy for you to talk about learning from the past when your generation had it easier." A murmur ran through the room, not in Keller's favor. Eastwood let out a short laugh, shaking his head. "Easier?" He repeated the word like it was the dumbest thing he'd heard all night. "I started in Hollywood when they told actors like me to change their name because it sounded too rough. I worked as a bricklayer before I ever got in front of a camera. You think that was easy?" Keller blinked. He hadn't prepared for that. And from there, it was over. By the end of it, Keller wasn't the one making a statement. He was the one learning a lesson. Because tearing someone down doesn't mean you've built anything.
And that
was his mistake. Because you can try to out-talk Clint Eastwood, but every time, the outcome is the same.